Welcome to the Eastern States Exposition, the largest state fair in the Northeast. We are now at the far northwest end of the park near Gate 1, and here is the Moses Building, which is a dormitory, and on our right are the state buildings, and we're now on State Street, and we're going to head to the Avenue of the States, and we're going to start off with the state buildings. Over here on the left, you can see the little booth set up to sell Big E cream puffs and Big E Clairs. Ahead of us is an information booth and Hamden Avenue, which will lead us to the main gate eventually. We're going to come around the back of that. We're going to make a big counterclockwise sweep of the park with a lot of detours because there's a lot to see at this fair. I wanted to do an updated video because there are a few changes at the fair this year. And over here, we're going to start with the New Hampshire building. But look at the line. It would take us forever to get through this. So I'm going to bypass this building. And if you want to see what it's like inside, it hasn't changed all that much. You can look at the previous video, which I'll link to in the description, that I did the walkthrough I did a few years ago of the Big E. And instead, we're going to go into the next building, which is the Connecticut building. And the Connecticut building, you'll see one of the changes that's happened. And it is a huge help for the fair. One of the big attractions at this fair are the state buildings. So the 5 states of New England are all along the Avenue of the States. And they have vendors that are companies, small companies that are actually in that state. And originally, the aisles in the Avenue of the States, the buildings, were so narrow that it was a bottleneck, and you were basically in the middle of a river of people and you couldn't move. They've essentially doubled the width of the aisles here, which is wonderful. To do that, they had to cut down the number of vendors that were in here. It's not a bad thing. So you at least have a little more time and a little more space to look at the things that are in here. So I'm really glad they did that. It makes for a much more enjoyable experience at the fair. And Connecticut is the only state building that adds a tent extension, a rather large tent extension, onto the back of the building and adds even more vendors in there. They've done that for I don't know how many years. And there's a lot of good stuff. The reason that we always go to the Big E, Karen and I, is because of the food. There is an enormous amount of food, all different types of food that you could imagine, whether it's Asian food or Eastern food or good old American food, carny food, exotic food that you will never have anywhere else. Food is everywhere at this fair, and you can pretty much eat your way through the fair. Lenny and Joe's fish tails over here on the right. We passed Najami's, which is a really good Mediterranean place that was in that tent back there. All sorts of stuff. The Randy's Worcester Street Pizza Shop is very popular. They're there every year. And one of the nice things about the fair is if you're a vendor here, they pretty much give you your spot. If you come back, you get your spot every year. So people know where to find you. If you decide not to come back, then your spot is given away to somebody else, and that person has the option to keep their spot every year. And that's one of the things that Karen and I like because we know the vendors we really enjoy. Like over there is a really good cider donut place, the best cider donuts at the Big E. So they're there every year. We know where to find them. So now we're in the Vermont building. And we really like the Vermont building for a different reason. Over here, of course, there is cheese, Vermont cheddar cheese. And over here is all sorts of fudge. They have further down maple candies, of course, Vermont maple syrup. And again, lots and lots of room that wasn't here before. Some of the vendors had to be rearranged and moved to different spots, so it took a little while to find some of them. Also in Vermont, they have these little one-way stickers on the floor, so you can only progress through one way, which keeps the bottlenecks a little bit down. Also, all of the state buildings in the back now have lots and lots of picnic tables. Previously, there was nowhere to eat the food that you would buy here, which was a little problem. But now there are plenty of tables out back. We usually didn't have any trouble finding a place to sit and just relax and eat. Now over here on the right is one of my personal favorite places at the Big E to eat. It's Skinny Pancake, and they make absolutely incredible crepes. And these aren't like, you can get the typical crepes that you would expect, like, apple crepes and blueberry crepes, things like that. But they also have a veggie monster crepe that's filled with spinach, squash, caramelized onions, and pesto, and cheese, of course. And it's just amazing. So now from here, we walk across. You can see some of the picnic tables over there. And now we're going to go into Karen's favorite building, the main building. And I really like this one too. A couple of vendors that we always come to every single season. And over there on the left is Storrowtown Village, which we'll get to later on in the video. Now this building was drastically rearranged this year. This was always a bottleneck right here, and they've basically opened it way up and they spread the aisles out, which is really good. The bottleneck was usually caused by this little place, right, not this place here, but this place right here. They have amazing smoked salmon on a stick. Now, you might think that's bizarre, but you got to try it. It is just incredible. It is so delicious. That's Karen's favorite place, the fresh Maine lobster rolls. She will get several of those when we come here. And then we have whoopie pies and blueberry pies, lemon blueberry crumb cake, lots and lots of dessert. Wicked Maine Pops. There's homemade ice cream right there. Lots and lots to choose from. And, of course, Maine potatoes. Now, you see this line? That line goes out that door and then into this back and forth queue line. And you could be standing in line waiting half hour to an hour for a baked potato. But that's a tradition at the Big E. So that's the main building. And the next building in a row is the Massachusetts building. And it has always been a mystery to me why these buildings are arranged the way they are. They're not alphabetical. They're not according to the geographical location in New England. It seems like they're just randomly plopped down. I don't know if it was first come, first served. I do know that that thing you're looking at way back there is the transportation center. And if you come to the Big E grounds in the off-season, like for a convention or something, normally you'll be entering through that archway there. So now let's wander into the Massachusetts building here. And this building is set up a little differently from the others. Probably because the Big E is in Massachusetts, so they made a bigger building. So you have finished pancakes over here on the right. Mac and cheese over on the left. Of course, it wouldn't be a Massachusetts building unless there was a Red Sox display. Now over here, the Fresh Massachusetts Apples booth has the best cider, and at the best price, $1 for a small cup or $4 for a large cup. And notice this section over here, this big sort of atrium area in the middle of the building. No other state building has that. And when I was a kid, that had a huge fish pond there. And in fact, all the state buildings had these big displays of what they did. I think New Hampshire used to have a big ski slope in it. And over here on the right, this, in my opinion, the best chili at the fair. Really spicy, very good. The Sub-Zero, it's basically Dippin' Dots without the dots. They mix the ice cream in nitrogen and serve it to you that way, so it's really cold. And now we're going to move out into the last building on the Avenue of the States, and that is Rhode Island. And straight ahead you can see that red and blue. That is, it's sort of basically a tractor pull, but it's a themed to look like a little train, and there are two of them, and for $5 you can get a ride around a part of the Big E. It doesn't take you through the whole fair. I think it'd be nice if they did, so you get a sort of lay of the land if you're new here, but it just takes you in a small circle around the sort of west end of the park. So let's go into Rhode Island here. There's a wine bar if you want to get your liquor in style there. And for the past several years, they've been advertising this Jack-o'-lantern spectacular, and they have all these Jack-o'-lanterns all over the place. It looks really nice, especially at night, of course. And again, if you had a reference for how this was in the past, these aisles are so much wider now. It's really nice. And the Southeast Light Delights has pretty darn good grilled cheese on sourdough there. They also have shrimp cocktail and, of course, lobster. And there are clam fritters over here, Clam Shack. All right, and that finishes up the state buildings on the Avenue of the States. And I had gotten to the park specifically a half hour before it opened so that I could be ready to go through here when there wasn't a big crowd. And as you saw at the New Hampshire building, the line stretched down Hampden Avenue. It was this huge line already waiting to get in. So that didn't work out, but I did make it through the other buildings while people were still trying to make their way through New Hampshire. There's that little Big E tram that you see there. So let's go across. I don't think I've ever been into the New England Grange building, which has a lot of nice displays. It's a sort of throwback to the way the Big E used to be, as it had its roots, like so many of these fairs did, as an agricultural fair. And this is what you would expect in a fair like this. You have homemade jams and jellies, you have homemade scarves, homemade wood products, homemade sweaters. The fair started off as the New England Agricultural and Industrial Exposition in 1916, and the idea was to educate young people in how to be good farmers, because that's really what primarily the United States was doing in those days. It was a lot of agriculture. Hi, Karen. And it gradually expanded and grew, and now agriculture is still a big part of the show. As you're going to see, there are several buildings devoted to it, but most people come here not for the agriculture, but specifically for the amount of just food and vendors that are here that you can't find anywhere else. Over here, the New England Craft Pub is sponsored by the Delaney House, which is an upscale restaurant in Holyoke. There's the Mattress Firm tent, and Mattress Firm is a big sponsor of the fair. And off in the distance there, you can see the D, E, and F barns. And over there is also the outdoor horse ring. And there's all the turkey legs you can eat. And in front of us is the West Springfield Lions Club. That's been there as long as I can remember. They have the Flatliner Burger, which is basically just everything you can imagine piled onto a hamburger. There are also a lot of exotic things. So you have turkey legs, but really what people come to the fair for are things that you can't find anywhere else. You have the Agawam Lions Club across there, and they're serving, fairly typical food like hamburgers and hot dogs. Over there is the Big E Arena, which we'll get a glimpse of a little later. I'll tell you about that. But the Agawam building also serves bison, elk, alligator, rattlesnake, rabbit, and of course the ubiquitous lobster macaroni and cheese. And you'll also notice these carny stands, that you see at most county fairs. They're everywhere. They have all sorts of food, and that's really, again, one of the big attractions. Deep fried everything. Over here is Opa Opa, and that's another thing you find a lot of. You can't count the number of microbreweries that are in this fair. That is a local company, and there are dozens and dozens of other local companies scattered all over the fairgrounds. So lots and lots of beer and wine everywhere. Here's a little apple fry stand. Those are pretty good, actually. I had those at Legoland for the first time. And over there on the left is the Coliseum, which we'll get to a little later, one of the biggest buildings on the fairgrounds. But instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take a walk down through the North American Amusement Midway. And this is another thing that draws a lot of people, especially kids, to the park. It's basically a giant amusement park inside the Big E. Now, I won't be walking down every twisting little alleyway through the Midway, but down there you could see the park's carousel, which is sort of smack in the middle of everything. And no surprises. I mean, most of the vendors here are the things you'd find at a carnival. So you have your cotton candy, you have your French fries, stuff like that. Over here is another look at the arena, and they have big name acts that play there at night, and that's an upcharge. It's usually like $45 to see those. There you can see some more of the alleyways going down. That Ferris wheel was new this year. It is the largest touring Ferris wheel in the United States Carnival circuit, 150 feet in diameter. And it was a separate charge. You can get a wristband and ride all the rides here all day if you want. That's $35. The Ferris wheel is not included in that. That costs $10.50 a person to ride. So we did not do that. They have lots and lots of fun houses here and dark rides all along this stretch. They're very small. They look beautiful with these, what they call ballyhoo, the big facades out front that draw people in. That makes it look like a huge ride, but because they're all trailers, there's actually very little depth there. So for little kids, it's great. They love it because for them, it's huge. For adults, not so much. There's your typical Music Express, another haunted house, a roundup. Now on our left is a fairly stock Galaxy style or Zyklon style roller coaster you see at a lot of carnivals and fairs. The Ring of Fire way at the end of the Midway there. And you'll see a lot of these fresh squeezed lemonade booths that are all over the place. I have my favorite, which is in the Better Living Center. and they have a pretty good deal. If you get their 32-ounce cup for $9, you can bring it back anytime and get a refill for only $4. And it's really good lemonade. So that turns out to be one of the better deals for a drink that they have at the fair. And things seem a little quiet here because they're not really open yet. The fairgrounds open at 10 o'clock, but the Midway here with the rides doesn't open till 11. So again, I needed to make this swoop through the park and do it efficiently, so I'm getting it while it's very quiet. Normally this place is bustling. There's another walk-through funhouse. And of course, as you can see over on the left, there are plenty of spin and barf rides that you find at most carnivals. We are now approaching the far east end of the fairgrounds. The building in the distance that you can see is the Mallary Complex, and that's one of the agriculture buildings, and we'll be taking a trip into there. As all county fairs, the Big E is heavily weather dependent. So if you happen to have a string of bad weather for a week, it just kills their attendance. But in the case of this particular year, they did pretty well. They had 3 days out of the run that were rainy. And one of the days that was sunny, they set a record of 177,000 people in the fair. That just boggles my mind. I can't imagine how crowded it must have been that day, and I'm glad I wasn't here for that. That's why when Karen and I come here, we prefer to come early in the morning on a weekday so that everything's nice and quiet. Usually doesn't last long because normally by the afternoon the place gets crowded. But early in the morning, usually on a weekday, you have a good chance of having a lot of breathing room for yourself. So now we're coming out of the North American Midway area. As you can see, there were more pathways off down the left, and those would have more games on them and food booths and a few rides. In front of us there is the International Plaza, and we're going to check that out in a little bit. And that's looking west, and there's the Coliseum, that domed building over there, which we saw earlier. The road we're on now is, appropriately, East Road, and over on the left is Springfield Road, which leads to Industrial Avenue, which we'll see in a little bit. So let's go into the Mallary building. It's the most recent of all the buildings that had been constructed on the fairgrounds. I remember actually when they were building it. And you can see a nice display of tractors here. They have this every year, some old and new tractors. It was one of all my favorite parts of the fair when I was a little kid. They used to have these scattered around the fairgrounds, and you could actually get on them and pretend you're riding them. Over here on the left, this is the annual home of pig racing. And the 4-H Club has this little milk shack here where you can get milkshakes. So let's take a right and go into the Mallary Complex. If any of you have caught my videos of the Amherst Railway Society Hobby Show that they put on every winter, you might recognize some of these buildings because they use 5 of the buildings in the fairgrounds to display all the model railroad setups. and this is one of them. Over here on the right, they have some displays of cattle and competitions. I always wonder if the cattle looked at that and thought, geez, why do they show me all cut up there? Is that what's going to happen to me? Is that my fate as a cattle? Over here on the right is a refrigerator that looks like a cow. And all during the day, it has little performances by animatronic characters. In fact, look, it's starting up right now.
I want to stay fresh, but that's not overdo it. I don't want to end up iced like one of those imitation dairy products.
Hey, come on. What do you mean imitation? I got milk. I made for more milk than you can fit in you.
Whoa, family show, baby. Think kids. Think wholesome. Think milk.
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, just look at that guy. He's only 2%.
Must keeping up with the times, my friend. A little less fat, but I've got all the protein, vitamin D, and calcium, any other type of milk on the shelf. And it comes right down.
I don't know why that milk jug has a voice that's similar to James Cagney. Gangster milk jug. That's rather strange. So anyway, here you can see all of the displays of various cattle that are kept here, and those are mostly on the right. And over here on the left are sheep, goat, and alpacas.
Some of you here before, really another stylish type of a sheep off to the side. One that you appreciate for that. When we set this one into motion, I'd like her to be a little more secure in terms of her hop placement for me today to be able to ride her higher. And rounding out my top lineup, again, a really nice kind of ewe lamb. She's straight in terms of her lines, just giving up too much in terms of muscle to be able to compete higher in this particular class. Great group of sheep. Congratulations.
And throughout the day, over here, they have demonstrations of sheep shearing.
$5 extra, we leave the kids' ears on even though they don't use them, you know. So, my name's Andy Rice. I come from Halifax, Vermont. It's the second oldest town in the state, and nobody knows where it is. Anyway,
So that's the Mallary building. We'll head back out. And there's still a few more things in this area that we can take a look at. Over on the right here is an information booth, and there are many of these type of booths in many of the buildings all over the fair. Hello to you too. Now, over here on the right is something that locals look forward to every season. It's a butter sculpture. That's not all solid butter. They have a chicken wire frame that they make, and then they layer a skin of butter on top of it. But still, really impressive work, and it's different every year. There are weavers making a quilt that is actually carved in the back. And over this section, they always have a Christmas tree display for the best Christmas tree and the best wreath. Now over here on the right is the farmer's market, and they have wine tasting that goes on all day, and it's a long line for the wine tasting all the time. I mean, you got to remember, this is really early in the morning, and people are lined up for their alcohol already. And over here on the right is the formal entrance to the farmers market. And there is gate 9, 9A technically, and that's where most visitors will park when they come to the fair. If you don't know about the parking that's available at people's homes nearby, which is usually cheaper than what the Big E asks, then you will normally park at gate 9. Parking is available on Norman Street, which is across from the main entrance to the Big E. But you have to get there early because those lots fill up really quick because they're, people's yards, so they're rather small. But parking generally ranges from $10 early in the morning to $30 by later in the day. So the earlier you get there, the better off you are. In front of us is another information booth. Some of the information booths also have Big E gifts that you can get, like t-shirts and mugs. And they also have a really nice book that was put together about the history of the Big E. So this is once again Springfield Road, and there's the Midway that we just came out of. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to head into the International Plaza, which is right in front of us there. And as you might expect, the International Plaza has international vendors. Now the sign for the West Side Grill makes it look like this is the West Side Grill, but it's not. It's actually a concession inside the International Plaza, and it's run by the Big E. And of course it's called West Side Grill because it's on the west side of the fairgrounds. And there it is. So we're just going to take a quick run through here. We're not going to look at every single aisle because it would take quite a while. So you have the normal, there's the Mattress Firm again set up. A couple of these Christmas tree vendors and flag vendors around. This is a really nice concession. Karen and I actually got something there. They sell singing bowls or meditation bowls made in Tibet. Really beautiful tone to them. And believe me, these days we need all the meditation we can get. So we'll swing around this area here, and I wanted to show you this Via of Lebanon, which is a really good Lebanese concession. They have some really good falafels there. Now, in past years, this building would be packed with vendors. You notice how it's a bit empty, and I think that's still the repercussions of the pandemic. Now that the pandemic, this is really the first year that it's easing off, so I think you're going to see more and more vendors come back. Now, the section we're in right now is called the Dingle Peninsula, and it's all vendors from Ireland. So you can get Irish sweaters, Irish crystal, Irish dishes. So anything that you want from Ireland, you can find here. This also took a big hit during the pandemic because they couldn't come over and they couldn't import anything. But that's easing now, so there are more vendors there, and I'm sure that will keep growing as time goes on. And obviously there are some things in here that are not really international, like a cool comfort pillow isn't really international, but it's a vendor and they had space. There's another information booth there. Manny's is a local company. They actually are a appliance vendor, but Manny, the owner, decided to get into the olive oil business and so makes his own olive oils, and that's what's being sold there. And now we've popped out onto New England Avenue. And if we look over to the left, you can see basically all the way toward the entrance, the main entrance to the Big E. And instead, we're going to go to the right. There's that information booth we saw a little earlier. And we're going to take a walk down Industrial Avenue and swing around to the Better Living Center through that way. And just like at an amusement park, the fairgrounds was playing pop music in the background, so occasionally you're going to hear reversed audio to avoid a copyright strike. For some reason, this year the Big E chose the 80s. All of the songs that they were playing were from the 80s. I guess my era now are the senior citizens that are being targeted. And all over the fair, you're going to see those massage chairs set up because there's a lot of walking you do. It's a very, very large fair. The massive building that you see over on the left is the Better Living Center. That is the largest building on the Big E Fairgrounds, and it's used year-round for all sorts of things like home shows and RV shows. It's a very, very busy building. Notice over on the right there was this huge tent for hot tubs. You ain't seen nothing yet. We got another hot tub tent coming up that puts all other tents to shame. It is absolutely massive. And over on the left here is one of the many entrances into the Better Living Center. We're not going to take this one. We're going to keep going and circle around to another tent. There's one of the many pizza places. And here over on the right is hot Wisconsin cheese. So you can get cheese curds there, little cheddar nuggets and stuff. And we are now approaching the far northeastern corner of the park. There's the famous Big E giant slide that's been there since I was a kid. Always really popular with kids. That massive tent is the circus. And they've been having a circus at the Big E since as long as I can remember. And it's moved in different areas throughout the fair's run. And it's lived here for maybe a couple decades. It's been in that position. And originally it was Hannaford Circus. This year the circus is Viva la Circus. So that's the one that's going, and it runs throughout the day and it's free. And you can see this little stage over on the right. Those are all over the fairgrounds. They're sponsored by various breweries. Camel Kingdom that you can see up ahead has, as you might expect, camel rides. You can also see some ticket booths here. And these ticket booths are part of Gate 7. And again, this area used to have more vendors around. And again, I think the pandemic has sort of kept them away for a while. But I'm sure next year there'll be more and more people coming back. Now, as we round this corner, there is that gargantuan tent that I was talking about that houses a hot tub vendor. It's just massive. There actually used to be next to it a beer tent that was even bigger, that was 2 stories, so it had 2 levels in the tent. That didn't return this year. But the hot tubs are certainly protected. So down this way, this is Industrial Avenue, and there's essentially just more vendors all the way down. So this is a good time, before we reach the main gate, to duck into the Better Living Center. Now again, I'm not going to go through every aisle of the Better Living Center because that alone could probably take about a half hour. It's just huge. But I'll give you a general idea of what's in here and how large the place is. And when you come to the Biggie yourself, you can just take your time wandering through and check out all the different things you can buy. I've seen a lot of these world's best back support vendors all over the fair this year. I guess they know their demographic. It's an aging population, so you're seeing more and more things to help out senior citizens. A lot of scooters, electric scooters on sale all over the fairgrounds too. Many of the vendors here are from out of state, but there are a lot of local companies. Like you see Ferrandino's over there. They're a local company. And you'll see Falsetti's in a little bit, the music vendor. They're from Springfield. So, you know, a nice mix of local and out of state people. A lot of the food vendors are local. This shows yet another advantage of coming early because usually the Better Living Center is shoulder to shoulder when you're in here. People pack this place during the day, usually later on. So early in the morning, it's nice and quiet. Of course, now that I've been telling everyone early in the mornings is the best time to come, everyone will come early in the morning and it'll be crowded. But what the heck. For now, it's nice and peaceful. Down there you could see another snack bar. They actually serve veggie burgers there, so that's a good thing. And if you need any artificial palm trees in your house, now you know where to go. All right, so that does it for the Better Living Center. We're going to take a left here and go out near an area that the Big E calls the Front Porch. And the Front Porch is an area the Big E created to highlight local vendors. So we'll see that. Over there on the right is one of my favorite concessions. This is the Granville Country Store from Granville, Mass. They have the best macaroni and cheese, and also this absolutely amazing grilled cheese with garlic on it. That's just to die for. And there you just saw the E stage, which is another one of those stages that has musical performances throughout the day. And that over there on the right is the main gate. That's the main entrance to the Big E. Most people will come in gate 9, but that's considered the main entrance, right on Memorial Drive in West Springfield. So let's take a detour down here. We're heading north toward New England Avenue, and there are a couple of vendors that I wanted to point out. That's the main entrance to the Better Living Center is on the left. There's Boardwalk Noodles. Next to it is Soulfully Vegan. But this little place with the rubber ducks, they're a new concession this year, and they were serving fried chicken milkshakes. You heard that right. Fried chicken milkshakes. So this is the front porch area with the local vendors. And now we're out on the main concourse. And as you can see, New England Avenue over on the left is just packed with food vendors all the way down. And over here on the right, that big tent that you see is the Court of Honor stage, which has concerts going on all day, all night, every single day of the fair, all different types of people they have. For instance, they had Modern English, the Alley Cats, Katie Tunstall, Young at Heart Chorus, the Yardbirds, Canned Heat, DJ Jazzy Jeff. So yeah, lots and lots and lots of acts, and they're free. It's just wide open, and you can just stroll in there anytime you want. So that's a really nice perk of the fair. So the reason I'm walking down New England Avenue right now is not to show you yet more food, although there is some interesting food down here, like this one, the Crazy Burger. Essentially, it's a loaded cheeseburger between two glazed donuts. So it's right up there with the Flatline Burger. So we're heading down here so we can cut into the Farm-a-Rama building. And that will leave just one more building to look at. Well, I should say 2 more buildings to look at before we're done. And the fair is almost sarcastically known for deep fried everything. Like I said earlier, they have deep fried Oreos, deep fried cookie dough. There's even deep fried butter. I kid you not. So plenty of stuff to clog your arteries if you are so inclined. All right, International Plaza, which we've already seen, is on our left. That actually is also known as the Young Building during the time when the fair is not running. The Farm-a-Rama, which we'll look at now, is on the right. But in front of us right now is the International Food Court, and they have a lot of interesting food there too. They have really good Indian food concession there that serves vegetable samosas and palak paneer and all sorts of curried food. It's really good. And there's also, ironically, a White Hut, which is a local hamburg joint. So let's turn around and head into Farm-a-Rama. The 4-H Club is a big sponsor of a lot of the stuff that you're going to see in here. And the first thing you see when you come in this entrance is the bright orange and white trademark of Hallamore, and they're Clydesdales. Hallimore's been at the park as long as I can remember, and the Clydesdales pull a big wagon in the parade that goes through the Big E grounds a couple times a day. So, in this, as you would expect, in this Farm-a-Rama are a lot of farm things like goats, sheep. You have vegetable displays, and floral displays. Over here you have some pigs. And the first day we came to the fair this year, on the first day of the fair, the mother pig gave birth to a bunch of little piglets. And they're all doing quite well. That's a lot of bacon. This building has a lot of activities for kids, and one of them, which I always find sort of amusing, is over here where they can go shopping for fresh produce. And over here is the perennially popular attraction in this building, the chick hatchery. And like with the animatronic dairy display we saw, we have an animatronic vegetable display here. This is a little creepy, though. You have all these singing vegetables telling you how much they want to be your friend. They sound sort of desperate. And now we're going to cut across here and go into the Big E Coliseum. Now the Coliseum, for a long time, was one of the largest venues in the area, and they hosted all sorts of acts here, from bands to comedians to all sorts of stuff. And as you can see, it's huge. Right now they're getting ready to do a horse show, and that's mostly what happens in here during the run of the fair. They have all sorts of horse shows, horse jumping events, or I don't know what they call these events because I'm not a horse person myself, but they show them trotting and galloping and all sorts of stuff. So that runs throughout the entire fair. And it's a really nice setup in here because what they have is they have multiple cameras throughout that are all run, and they have a big screen here so they can get close-ups of what's going on. You can see them opening the gate there. That's where the horses enter and exit from. But since there's nothing going on right now, it's supposed to start in a few minutes, let's just keep on our little journey here. We're going to go out this way, and what we're looking at right now is the back of the Court of Honor stage. That really big building that you see in front of us is the Sea Barn, and that is off limits to guests. So I've never been in there. I don't know what it looks like inside. I assume that's where a lot of the equestrians have their horses and equipment boarded while they're here at the fair. All right, so now we're going to head out onto Commonwealth Avenue for the last leg of our journey. We still have to take a look at the New England Building and Storrowtown Village. The building over there that you see with that formal Federalist front there is the Big E Administration Building. Now, we're going to take a peek through here. That's Hamden Avenue over there. And those yellow tents, that's a petting zoo. And they also have pony rides there. So that's a nice place to take the kids. But we're going to continue down Commonwealth Ave here. That big building that you see way at the end, that is the Massachusetts Building on the Avenue of the States. I told you how long the Big E's been in operation, well over a century, and it only closed down a few times. For the World Wars, it was closed, and it also closed during the pandemic. So in 2020, there was no Big E, and that was a shock to everyone who remembered it fondly as being this thing that happened all the time, rain or shine. There was even one time where the Midway got basically decimated by a hurricane that went through, and they got the thing back up and running and kept it going anyway. So we all expected the Big E to keep going one way or another, but the pandemic pretty much sidetracked it. So it's nice to be back again. It was happening in 2021 as well on a smaller scale. There weren't as many people, but it feels like the Big E again, which is nice. So here's the New England Building, and in the New England Building is the main booth for the Big E Claire and the Big E Cream Puffs, if you're into that sort of thing. The New England Building is the crafts building at the fair. So here you have a lot of crochet and quilting, and you have photographs, and so all the stuff that doesn't really have to do with agriculture per se, jewelry displays, printmaking, all that sort of stuff is in this building. I keep saying to myself that one day I'm going to enter the photography contest here, because they have an enormous number of entries, as you're going to see here. Both sides of those panels are just filled with photographs, and they're all really good. And over on the left here, they have crafting demonstrations that go on throughout the day. I really think they need a little more light there. There was just one overhead light. And this has been here for a number of years, the Quilting Carousel. So that is the New England Building. Now we'll head back out onto the main street here. This one is Hamden Avenue, and we will take a peek at Storrowtown Village. Up here on the left is an interesting concession That's cookie dough on a stick. It's actually really good. Over on the right, that big brick building is sponsored by the West Springfield Fire Department. That's the Firehouse Restaurant, and it's very popular. They serve a lot of just generally good American food there, like hot dogs and hamburgers. Now, in front of us now, as we head into Storrowtown Village, is the carriage house, and this is basically an outlet for craft vendors. So you'll find all sorts of little craft items like pins and jewelry. So I'll keep my mouth shut and we'll just walk around. These were really neat. They're carved books, and she can actually carve one right there for you to your specifications. All right, so now we'll walk out into Storrowtown Village proper. This was designed like an old town square, and the Exposition brought in buildings from around Massachusetts, and so they're all real vintage buildings from the 1700s or 1800s, and they reconstructed them here. This one is a blacksmith shop, and they actually do blacksmithing right in there. You can go and watch blacksmithing demonstrations. You have the old schoolhouse here, and they have it fully staffed with people in costume, and they will chat with you about what they do and what it was like back in the day. There's an old church. The music you hear is coming from that stage in the distance. Every day, like so many other areas of the Big E, they have entertainment here. And the first week is one entertainer, second week is another entertainer, second week, or in the last week of the fair, is another entertainer. Today, the entertainer is a hypnotist that will be on there, and he was playing some pre-show music before he starts. Over on the left was the Christmas shop, where that has all sorts of Christmas and Halloween gifts. This right here is the Storrowtown Tavern, which is open year-round, and it's really well regarded in the area as a very good restaurant. There are usually more crafters around these grounds, again, dressed in appropriate garb for like the 1700s or 1800s, and they'll be like turning wood or making leather products. I didn't see any out this year. This is the last little area of the craft section of Storrowtown Village. These little shops on the right, the building is there permanently year-round. And the crafters staff it during the Big E. And like I said before, if you get a booth here, you generally have this booth until you no longer come to the fair. There's a little herb garden over there. And over here on the left is an example of what I was talking about having a booth. There used to be a different crafter here, and they stopped coming during the pandemic. So this guy picked up on it with these bells, and now it's his booth that he has every year if he wants it. And we actually bought one of these chimes, wind chimes, from him, and it sounds really nice. Over on the right is a vendor that's been there as long as I can remember with pickles. It's the Pickle Barrel. And now the carriage house is once again on our right, and that takes us out of Storrowtown Village. So now we'll head back out onto Hampden Avenue and take a look at one final building on the Exposition grounds. And far in the distance in front of us is the Avenue of the States, where we started. Interesting thing I found out about the Avenue of the States and all the state buildings, they are basically their own independent little fiefdoms. So each state has control over what goes on in their buildings. So each building has its own state police force, and that's why they're able to sell lottery tickets in each state building, is because they're basically in their own little kingdom there. It's interesting how the Exposition arranged all that. So here's the last stop we're going to make. This is the museum, the Big E Museum.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you? It used to be, for most of its existence, a circus museum. And I think when I did my video the last time, we walked through the circus museum. But they've converted it for the anniversary of the Big E. They converted it into a Big E museum, which makes a lot of sense because it has a lot of history, and they did a really nice job with the displays. One of the most fascinating things, I think, is this dry erase board up here, which shows attendance as time goes on. And look at that Saturday, 177,000 people in the park. Yow. But then they have that panel that shows all the way back through history the total number of attendees at the fair. So it's a biggie. That's why they call it the Big E. Right here is a photograph of the Great Flood of 1938. The purple suit you see belonged to the mechanical man, who was an attraction here for a long time, basically a guy that acted like a robot. There's Liberace, who did not act like a robot. There's a whole wall about the Storrowtown Theater, which was a very popular attraction here for years. That's one of the seats from the sky ride that used to run from the entrance at the main gate all the way over to the Midway. I remember taking that when I was a kid. And a lot of memorabilia. And that finishes up the last building at the Big E. So you think there's enough to do here? It's huge. We're lucky because we get season passes, and you get them before the fair starts, the week before the fair starts, and there's a discount. And so we can come whenever we want because we're retired. For a lot of the population, they have to pick a day and come on that day. But the fair is really too big to do in one day. You've got to do it over multiple days if you want to really see everything. Because you just can't eat all that food in one day as well. Plus, there's all the entertainment. Like over here, they had a basketball demonstration because Springfield is the birthplace of basketball, so lots to do. So the fair usually starts the second week of September and runs up to October. So if you're in the Western Massachusetts area, well worth it to stop by the Eastern States Exposition, the Big E.